Hello and welcome to Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started. Our catalyzing statement is a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. Enjoy this module. Hi and welcome to this module. We're going to talk about customer, vendor, and employee communications. And I basically looked at this in the description and talked to Rick about it, and I said, what's up here? I mean, this has kind of been parts of all other modules, but yet he had a need, you felt, to talk about this specifically, and you talk about this concept of over-communication. And I was thinking, you mean like, copy everybody and everything and distract people, or does that lose their focus? But then, of course, after listening to Rick, as often happens after a while, he actually has a point and a premise here that is unique and worthy of its own module. So tell us what you mean by this whole communication process with stakeholders.
Okay. I want to start this module with a story. And it's a true story, and some of you may have heard the story, but not from this perspective. I had a mentor who has since passed away, recently actually, and he told me the story of when he sat on the board of Sears Corporation. And if you think back to Sears in the 70s, many of you are old enough to remember how massive a presence Sears was. Sears stores were omnipresent. Sears was indestructible. And I remember him recounting the story to me that every quarter they would meet as a board, and one of the board members would say, hey, I just want you guys to know that there's this little company from Arkansas called Walmart, and I know they only have 50 stores and we have several thousand, but they seem to kind of have their stuff together, and we should really be looking at them. And if many of you or any of you have been to a board meeting, oftentimes in board meetings the most important topic is where we're going to have lunch or when's golf. And as is probably what happened in this scenario, people were concerned about golf. Or, were we going to have the steak from the place we ate at last quarter? But what happened here is nobody was paying attention. Nobody was capturing data from stakeholders, from the marketplace, from employees who were talking to customers, from board members of other companies. And so what happened then. Walmart was a startup probably competing against itself. Walmart had certain growth plans. They wanted to locate their stores out of big cities, whereas Sears was in big cities. They wanted to supply low-cost items, whereas Sears was offering all items, including very expensive appliances and whatnot. But the moral of the story here is most companies have the data in front of them that they need to be massive companies. Even if you're a one-person shop or you're an aspiring entrepreneur to start a company, all the data that you need to become a great company is usually in your sphere. There's a quote that my friend Rand Stagen loves to say. He says, all the information and the data that an acorn needs to become a massive oak tree is already locked inside of that little acorn. It doesn't need any other information. Obviously it needs water and it needs sunshine, but the data to turn that acorn into a massive company is right there. It is so interesting to me as I watch companies that the data that they need to become large, thriving enterprises, whatever your goal may not be to be large and thriving. It may just be to be very profitable. It may be that you want to go from working 80 hours a week to working 5 hours a week. The data that anyone needs to get where they need to go is usually locked inside the business. And so I love telling that story about Sears. And Walmart, as you know, over the course of about 2 decades, overtook Sears and then dominated Sears, and now is more than 10 times larger than Sears. Think about that story. So the purpose of this module is to have you create systems inside your business to capture everything. Before I pass it back to Pat to ask me some questions about this, I want to tell you another story. There's a business that we've all interacted with. I'd be shocked if the members who are based in the United States have not dealt with Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster Video dominated the landscape. And out of left field, this little company came along called Redbox that supplies videos, I think for $1 is where they started, in vending machines at gas stations, vending machines at 7-Elevens and convenience stores. Now Redbox has far more distribution than Blockbuster. And do you know that Blockbuster had the data on Redbox before they opened their first vending machine? Here's the thing. All the data that you need is locked in. So what I would like you to consider is creating funnels for each aspect of your business, for each stakeholder, if you will. And stakeholders are people that benefit from your business. Shareholders, vendors, employees, clients, customers of all kinds, banks that do business with you, the community at large. All of these stakeholders hold the key to make your business a better business.
Well, one of the things that I picked up is that when you're talking about communications, you're not just talking about information going out, you're talking about information you're collecting from these sources, that these are literally assets of intelligence for your company to help make it a better company. Now, one of the things I noticed about you is a habit. We have our weekly rhythms. We're on the phone every week talking, actually I'm sure every week, every day we have a scheduled call, right? Once a day, a rhythm every day that we get on the phone and we talk about finishing school. And every time we do, I know that you've opened up some file on your computer and you've captured emails, you've captured faxes, comments from multiple sources, what have you. Sometimes you'll say, hey, you left me a message on my cell phone 3 weeks ago with this particular idea or concept, let's follow up on it. So you're capturing everything and putting it into a bucket where you need to be able to process it so that there's nothing that's getting left behind. Now, one of the things that you had said to me that inspired this particular module is that you were consulting with a company that I also know pretty well, and that people would sit in meetings and something would come up and it'd be kind of an important thing, but nobody captured it. And then they'd just kind of go on. It might have been a big opportunity for some revenue, but there was no capture, no follow-up, no delegation, no anything. It's just like it lived for a moment and then it died right there and didn't get carried forward. So why don't you talk about the process of data capture from these multiple sources?
Yeah. So what every business needs, in my opinion, is the ability and the procedures to capture everything. Do you realize that the most important data that you need to know to run your business is probably coming from some random customer or ex-customer, or more importantly, someone who's not even your customer yet? They call the company and they talk to someone on the phone and they say, hey, why doesn't your company do this? And the person on the phone says, well, we don't do that. That's really not our business. But you want to encourage your employees to capture those data points. What we do on a regular basis is we go over all of the comments from customers, whether they come from Facebook or email or they're told on the phone. And we then place a priority on those. Sometimes we dismiss them out of hand. Sometimes we change the entire strategy of the business. It all depends. But here's the important thing. Most companies capture nothing. They don't capture it, they don't review it, they don't communicate it. So as Pat pointed out, when we were preparing for this module, he said, well, do you think that we should blind copy or carbon copy people on all emails? That's an interesting way to over-communicate, but that is the complete opposite of what we're talking about. We're going to touch on that in a moment. What you want to do is have all of the data bubble up to the top from all of your different stakeholders, and we'll hammer it home a little bit more as we go through the applications. But when it does come to over communicating, in terms of whether it's company meetings or systematic company processes, if you have new client drives or new employee drives or annual meetings of some sort, I believe going back to using rhythms to amplify and leverage time and success, you absolutely positively will benefit greatly with a permanent company calendar with every single solitary thing that your company does on that calendar. So the calendar can start running the business for you. And in the past, you've heard me say that companies are either great companies that have great habits or bad companies that have no habits. It's the same thing here. A good company captures everything. Every nugget of data is captured. A bad company captures nothing. You've often heard me say, and I'll say it again, when you walk into a company, you could smell the culture. And what I've come to learn over the course of now decades in business is I can kind of feel out an entrepreneur or someone who runs a business or a department by simply offering them a suggestion or asking a question and finding out the answer and then asking them another question as a follow-up and see what they write down. It's very interesting that some entrepreneurs devour information. Wait, hold on, let me write that down. Let me write this down. And then oftentimes they'll pick up their cell phone and call somebody in the company and say, listen, I just got a nugget of data. Be sure to put this in a permanent file somewhere.
Or if you're Rick, you're calling yourself, which is what happens very often. We'll be outside, we'll be driving in a car, we'll be right. All the next thing I know, he's dialing his phone, getting his own voicemail, and leaving himself messages.
It drives my wife nuts. But if you come up with a good idea, and it happens at least 5 times a day, sometimes I'll be on a trip and I'll come back and I'll have more than 50 messages from myself. But in the course of reading airline magazines or talking to people or whatever, I'm coming up with ideas. Oftentimes they're ideas that are shared in these modules. And I want to capture those ideas. I remember reading an interview when Richard Marx was really big as a singer-songwriter. And he said sometimes I'd be in a restaurant and a song idea would come to my mind and I'd rush to a payphone. This was before cell phones. And I'd sing the song to myself on my own voicemail. Why aren't you doing that? Oftentimes the greatest ideas in the world are fleeting. If you don't capture them just like that, they're gone. And so that's why it's incredibly important to capture everything that touches your business. At this point, I want to delineate between communications that are outgoing and data that is incoming. So I want to continue the conversation with Patrick on the data that's coming into you and how to manage that. And then we want to flip it to outgoing communications and talk about things like gratitude as well.
So we see how there's incoming data and that this data is vital intelligence for the company and that it needs to be captured. And in the applications, we'll talk more about specific strategies for doing that. Now let's flip it around, though, and talk about the outgoing communications and how to kind of organize and orchestrate that and why that's important also.
So I recently read an article about change inside corporations and what catastrophic and insidious issues and problems that they cause. And what I want to do is revisit back to strategy. If a company has a crystal clear strategy that emanates from their catalyzing statement, and they know exactly what they do, they know their customer, and they know their channel of delivery, then they can communicate that strategy and only look for clients and vendors and employees that align with that strategy. But what happens is most companies, they really don't know what business they're in, so they're constantly changing. And they're not changing based on data that they're collecting. They're changing based on inside decisions that are made. Well, let's try this or let's try that. So what I want to first say about communications outward is you have to be crystal clear that every single time you change something in your business, whether it's a price or whether it's a new email campaign or whether it's a new marketing campaign or whether it's changing the tagline of your business, it always causes chaos in your client customer's eyes, always. So you have to be extremely careful that all communications are born out of a solid set of values, a solid purpose catalyzing statement, and a crystal clear strategy. And that's really the secret. But what too often happens is they don't have clarity on those foundational items, companies, and they therefore are constantly changing, trying to do what? Create revenue, create profit, and the customer can smell you out in no time. They know when you're doing that. They know when a new deal is coming because you want to create revenue because it's the Christmas season, or you want to create a special deal because you've got a lot of customers asking you for a product. In my opinion, everything needs to emanate from a core.
I know in one of my companies, I mean, there's several examples I can probably cite myself, just in personal experience with this. One of the challenges or the voids that we had is that we didn't have a regimented structure and process for our outgoing communication when change would occur, just like what you're talking about. For example, our diagnostic technology in one of my companies started with a single technology. Then we added a second one. Eventually it became 5 technologies on the platform. But what happens? You've got your internet site, you've got your newsletter, you've got your ads that you're running, you've got seminars going out all over the world, you've got articles that are being written or have been written, you've got all these lines of communication that are constantly going out there. So what happens is you make a change to the product, and that's something that's not a bad thing in and of itself. However, when you have to sit back and every time a change happens in the company, that you have to think again, let me see, oh, well, we better update the website. Oh, yeah, well, what about our Facebook page? Oh, yeah, we better update that too. Oh, wait a minute, we've got, a dozen sales reps, throughout the world. Oh, we better get them that change, and oh, but wait a minute, they've got sales sheets. We got to update those sales sheets too. Oh, what about our distributors? Oh, crap, these guys are independent from us. We better get a conference call together with them and tell them about this change that we've made. And then you can start to see that one change that's made, and this is exactly what Rick is talking about, suddenly, if you don't have an outgoing communication ritual, a structure to it, a process to it, then suddenly you find yourself in the world of chaos instead of simplicity, trying to update your world, your universe, about nuances and changes in your offerings, either products or services, as a company. So what would have saved me a whole lot of trouble and create a lot more simplicity and a lot more leverage in my company, which of course would then increase probability for success, is if we stopped and said, we need to capture every line of communication to every important stakeholder, whether it be our vendors, our distributors, our salespeople, our clients and customers, etc., how we communicate in all these varying ways that a company might, and say, here is the structure and the matrix. Now, every time we make a change that our universe needs to know about, we have a process now that disseminates that communication and that we launch it in a way that is consistent, predictable, and effective. And I find that for myself, in my own experience, as well as most entrepreneurial type organizations, they kind of more whimsically make a change, and then even more whimsically from that, they try to communicate that change throughout the world. And you find so often that what's on a company's website versus what's in their product literature versus what happens when you walk in and talk to your employees, that nothing is connected properly, and it creates a real chaotic sense of urgency and reactivity within the business, and I think takes away your power, because now suddenly you don't seem like a fluid company. Brands are brand promises, basically. We expect that when we go in one Starbucks, that if we go to another one in a different city, that they're going to be very, very consistent in what goes on there, even if they make a change. If one Starbucks adds music and CDs, all the Starbucks are adding music and CDs, etc. So brand promise is a big part of communication, or I should say communication is a big part of brand promise. People are bonding to brand, they're bonding to you, hopefully, because they find that you're knowable. And if outgoing communication is inconsistent, chaotic, not efficient, what happens is you become unknowable to your customers, your vendors, and many times even your employees start to disconnect. So I can tell you that in the beginning when Rick started talking to me about this module, it wasn't making a whole lot of connections for me as far as what is the core of this, what do you mean by this? But as he started to talk about capturing data in and having congruency and consistency in process to information going out and to over communicate rather than under communicate, now suddenly I started to see all the implications through the lens of my own pain being an entrepreneur in my own businesses.
And to add to that, you have to make sure every company needs, as we talked about prior, a calendar of everything that happens, crystal clear strategy, and ways to communicate to clients, to add to what Pat was talking about. All of that needs to be congruent. So before you change anything, make sure you think about it and think about it and think about it. Too often, companies operate in a fire, ready, aim mentality instead of ready, aim, fire. Fire, ready, aim is all about throwing spaghetti at the wall, or if we build it, they will come, which is a joke. So often we've built companies or we've spent money on new restaurants or new businesses, and the client never came. And that's because no one understood gathering data first, capturing marketplace information, and building a company around that. I also want to add, at this point, we mentioned in the description of this module that we would talk about gratitude. And I often ask employees, who pays your salary? And it's funny, the responses. Do it with your own employees or have someone ask your employees and check the responses. Who pays your salary? Who pays your commissions? Who pays your bills at home? And if you only got one thing from this module, really understand this and embed it in the culture of your company. The customer pays your salary. Every one of your employees needs to say and understand, the customer pays my salary. That's who pays my bills. I use Hertz Gold, and I absolutely love Hertz Gold. It's just a phenomenal, phenomenal program. I've been in Europe, I've used Hertz Gold. When you use it, basically, you order a rent-a-car online, and you put in your flight number, and it's very simple. It only takes a minute. And then when your flight lands in whatever city you're going to, they have a car waiting for you where the key's in the car, and you just get in your car and go. It's very, very simple. And I've used it a lot. I'm a super frequent user of that service. Well, relatively recently, I was at Newark Airport, and I was at there was about 4 lines, and each one had a different name on top. One said Hertz Gold customers, one said Hertz Platinum customers. I don't remember, there was 4 separate lines. But in any case, I've been there many, many times. In fact, I even knew the employees by name. And I was in a hurry, as always is the case when I'm traveling. But anyway, I get on the line and it's moving really, really slow. And I'm waiting forever, it seemed like. It was probably about 30 minutes. Meanwhile, there was a line about 20 feet over from me that was moving really, really, really fast. And the customer service representatives behind the counter, they never took the time to say, sir, I know you're a frequent user of us, because I've seen them all many, many times. You're on the wrong line. And so after a long time had gone by, I really needed to get to a meeting. I walked over to the line that was moving very fast, and I said, excuse me, I've been waiting over here about 40 minutes. Would you mind if I went in front? And the very nice lady said, yeah, get in front of the line. And so I did. And all of a sudden, I've never really had this happen to me, and I can't remember if it did. The customer service rep behind the Hertz counter started screaming at me, as if I was the thing that comes out of the backside of a pig. It was, it was unbelievable the way she treated me. And I didn't react. I just said, who pays your salary? Do you have any idea who pays your salary? And do you know that I know your first name because I've been here so much? And do you know that you watched me? I was very calm. And she continued to scream at me and scream at me. It was the most bizarre thing. So the purpose of that long segue was this. Make sure your employees know who pays their salary. It will completely change the way that they communicate with your clients. And your clients are the ones that give you the valuable data that you need to grow your business.
So the theme here is what you're saying is gratitude for the customer.
Absolutely.
Gratitude for their business, the fact that they come back.
Yeah, and it all fits together because the customer is giving you data, you're thanking them for being part of your business. It works the same way with all of your stakeholders. And in the implementation guide is a list of stakeholders. You've got to have that two-way communication, the gratitude, the data, the gratitude, the data. And the more you're gracious and thankful for the customer and all of your stakeholders, the more they'll continue to feed the business.
And I guess in reality that becomes the question you can ask. Hi Sally, we're really thankful that you're here and that you're a customer of our business. What can we do to better serve you? And start collecting and have a repository for that.
And some people, if you ask them that question, they would say, well, it's real important that I scream at the customer every day. That really helps build our bottom line. We're laughing, but I mean, you've seen that at airlines. And the person behind the desk will say, well, I'm just having a bad day. Really? So because you're having a bad day, you're going to scare customers to go to another airline. Never ceases to amaze me how that works in business. But again, when you see that happen in a business, you have to understand that the culture of that business is not embedding this communication loop into the culture. So it's the ownership's fault, really.
So customer, employee, and vendor communications, the communications are bi-directional, meaning stuff is coming at you, and you got to put stuff out to them. The context for the employees toward not just the customers, but also the vendors, the people that you interact with, should show gratitude. And if you take this information and you learn how to leverage it properly, then you can take your business to a whole other level of success and profitability. So I think we're ready to talk about some applications. So let's talk about some applications here with this communication process and this capture process. And let's start on the receiving side. I think all of us, I've never met an entrepreneur who didn't have certain areas of epiphany where they, like you said, where suddenly, boom, there's an idea and it fleets and it's gone. For many, it's the shower. Sometimes it's driving. Sometimes they wake up with it. Sometimes it's, in front of the TV. Who knows? Everybody's a little bit different. For me, I get a lot of ideas in the shower, so I probably should be bathing a lot more. And I get a lot of ideas when I'm driving. I think in both cases, it kind of like there's just enough of my conscious attention distraction to let some things come up from my subconscious that kind of like just strike me. So the thing you have to do is, number one, know yourself and your company as far as how things might emerge there. But let's start with you. Where do you have your ideas most? And have a data capture way there. For example, Rick has got his circa 1923 cell phone. So that's always with him. And this old cell phone that I can't imagine that how when it breaks, he just goes onto eBay to find another old one rather than like buying something like an iPhone or a Droid. But he loves this thing. And what he does is he's going to take out the cell phone no matter where he is. He's going to whip that thing out, and he's going to call himself and leave a message. And I've watched him do it dozens and dozens of times. That wouldn't work for me necessarily. I like to do a few things. Number one, I have digital recorders. There's a digital recorder at my desk. There's a digital recorder next to my bed. There's a digital recorder that I carry with me wherever I go, so that I can be driving and all of a sudden, boom, that thing is up and I'm reciting into the digital recorder. And I can tell you, sometimes it accumulates for a while. I let it go longer than it should. And I can go back, there might be 30 things in there, and I'll go back and I'll say, oh my God, I forgot I had that idea. And it's a great idea. Here is a seduction that you should not fall for. If the idea is good enough, I'll remember it. How many times have I told myself that? How many times you told yourself that? Right? Oh, if it's a good enough idea, it's going to stick. I'll remember it. Well, I end up forgetting them sometimes, and they are truly good ideas. So I know I have friends that literally they go everywhere with a pen and a little piece of paper. Boom, that thing's coming out and they can write that way. There's not a right or wrong here. What's important is that you systematize, that you have a way of capturing ideas in the moment when you need them. If you're one of those guys who wakes up, in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning and you have an idea, you should have either a recorder or a pen and paper right next to the bed so that you can capture it right then, because the likelihood is, especially if it's the middle of the night, you're not going to get out of bed to go find a recorder or a piece of paper. You'll say, okay, I'll just remember when I wake up. I've had it happen. I'm speaking from experience, and I don't remember when I wake up. I'm like, God, what was that idea I had? I forget it. So first thing to do strategically is to figure out what is my capture process. And it doesn't have to be one. You can have multiple ones. The idea is cover all bases, leave no holes, and be able to capture any idea that might emerge. How might somebody then, that's for the individual, how might they then set up a system to capture it from employees?
Well, let's start with something I did with my executive team, which actually I did for myself too. There's a product, it's in the implementation guide, but it's called Night Notes. And some of you may even have this product. It's a phenomenal product. It's made in China, but it's basically a plastic device that holds a pad, and there's a pen in there, and it goes on my nightstand, and when you pull the pen out, a light comes on. So I have actually written notes in my night note and wake up in the morning, and I didn't even realize that I wrote it. I am so used to filling that thing out in the middle of the night that it's like magic. There'll be a business idea or something that I need to do, but I didn't realize that in the middle of the night I wrote it. So night notes is something I've given to my executives because I'm teaching them, do not let ideas be fleeting. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is creating a culture of capturing. Your entire culture needs to be based around capturing everything. Information from vendors, information from clients, information from anybody. You could be at a restaurant, and I've had this happen countless times. I'll call the manager over and I'll say, I don't know if you're aware of this, sir, but when you walk in the restaurant, there's a thing that people are tripping on. I just saw 5 or 6 people trip on it, and the manager will go, oh, okay. And then next thing you know, they're off doing something else because they're not a culture of capturing. And so if you get another thing out of this module, it would be that you embed this into your culture. So to answer Pat's question directly, night notes for you and for your key people. Number 2, embed in your culture capturing. What does that mean? That means creating systems to capture data. Maybe have someone responsible for capturing all client data. Have someone responsible for capturing all vendor data. Have someone responsible for capturing all community data or patient data, whatever you want to call it. But if you make somebody own it, then what you can do is have ritualistic meetings to discern that information, go through it, review it, and decide what you're going to do with it. One of the things we embedded in our culture about 12 years ago was we called it Friday afternoon beer and innovation. We would get a couple of 6-packs of beer with the management team, 4:30 on Friday, pull up the screen that drops down with a projector when projectors first came out, and we would write ideas that people had bubbled up from clients over the course of the past week. And we had pages and pages and pages of ideas to innovate the company. We would grade those ideas periodically, maybe once every 6 months, and then we would implement or we would mine the data on those sheets of paper to decide what our objectives would be for the next year or the next quarter. And you want to be able to measure what the feedback is telling you. Is it telling you that your prices are too low or too high? Is it telling you that you have too many products offered? There's a restaurant that I go to occasionally here in Dallas, and the menu is massive. And you're looking at this menu, and you're like, this menu is massive. And you say to you can't say waitress anymore. What's the new word?
Wait person.
Wait person. No, they actually say server now.
Yes.
So I say to the server, what's the biggest complaint you get here? And the server, without hesitating, says, everybody says the menu is overwhelming. And I said, how long have you been hearing that from customers? I've been here 11 years and I've heard it almost every day, at least 10 times. Oh, and in 11 years and hearing it 10 times, you haven't done anything to change it? Not my job. Oh, not my job.
And that's
So the bottom line here is make it your employee's job to capture that.
so now, once you've created that, you've found your varying capture mechanisms for yourself and your employees, and you've got that. What has to happen is all this data capture has got to flow into a single repository. In other words, what happens for a lot of people, again, from my own experience and looking at other people, you could walk in and I'll see scraps of papers all over somebody's desk who's a business owner. What are these? Oh, these are these varying ideas that I've had. And I just, they just live on their desk somewhere, and maybe eventually they go into a box or something. There's no, they've got the data capture side down, but now what's the process after that's going to drive this somewhere? So what you have to do is take a step back and say, okay, here's the data capture. All the data capture has got to flow to a single point of accumulation or a repository where these things can go into and be held. And then from there, they have to disseminate back out to where they belong. So let me give you some examples. And I've watched Rick do this. This is something that he is a part of his habits as a business leader. Emails will come in about finishing school we're doing right here. And then maybe voicemails, and then also other notes that we might have had from live meetings or our phone calls and so on and so forth. But what I know is that, for example, we have a rhythm, and this is where Rick talked about in this module how this ties into your rhythmic scheduled events, meetings, etc. Basically, Rick, I can tell, goes to his repository where things are captured relative to finishing school. And then what happens is he said, I'm going to be on the phone with Pat at 5 o'clock on Friday. I'm making up the times and days. And he will take those things and move them into his calendar that day. I do the same thing. This has got to go into the calendar that day because I'm going to be, here it is in this repository. I'm going to make sure that I've got it now enumerated here so that when I'm on the phone with Rick at this point, here's the ideas or the things that we need to discuss. It might be feedback from one of you who are watching right now. It might be something that was a compliment. It might be something that was a complaint. It could be any number of things. It might have been something that one of our employees in finishing school might have fed through to Rick. Whatever the case, it went into a repository, and then from the repository, it moved to a place where Rick was going to be able to address whatever that is. Nothing fell through a crack. If it's a financial thing, maybe it's going to go into the meeting with the CFO as compared to the meeting with me. But basically, just think in this way. Here's the wide net here. This captures everything. Here's a single point of repository. Things get deposited. And then from there, you allocate them to the right place for where it's going to be discussed, and either it's going to be acted upon or it's going to be thrown away, goes to the trash. Either way, it was processed and it didn't get lost.
That's really good information, Patrick. And one thing that people need to be aware of is when clients are calling you up, patients, clients, it doesn't matter how big your company is, when they're calling you up and complaining to you about something, you absolutely have to have the culture that says, thank you for that complaint. Because there were studies done, and when one customer complains, the studies have determined that between 10 and 100 customers had the exact same issue and never said a word. So those customers that are complaining are actually gifts. They're gifts, and you want to say thank you. And oftentimes when I've talked to complaining customers and I say thank you, it completely reverses the conversation because customers want to be heard. What happens when you call an airline and you have an issue and they don't apologize, they don't thank you for bringing the concern up, they just push back, they defend, they make you feel like you're a moron? What is that doing? Is that building up the rapport between you and that company that you're interacting with? No. So we want to bring back in the applications guide, applications portion of this module, the gratitude, thanking people, thanking them for paying your salary, thanking them for giving you important data, thanking them for being irate. So you remember from the earlier section where the employee of Hertz was irate at me, irate at a frequent user of their service who paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to them. Isn't that interesting? That is not that employee's fault. That employee was in a culture where it was perfectly okay to scream at the people that pay their salary. And obviously, when I say it's not their fault, what I mean is it's not their fault that they continue to do it and no one ever calls them out on it. It is their fault on an individual basis that they should be able to be composed. But the fact of the matter is your culture leads the way. Your culture always leads the way.
I'm going to throw a caveat into what Rick was just talking about, in that the customer isn't always right. Sometimes you might have a Looney Tune customer. So, and we've covered this on prior modules, so I'm not going to get into it here. But the bottom line is there's gratitude for the customer. The customer does pay the salary. The employee should know that. All those things that he said. But if you get a whack job, you got to handle that too. So that really talks about all the data capture coming in. Now let's talk about the application of the outgoing communications. And this is simple but not easy. So here's what simply must be done here. And I will tell you, if you do this, it will add so much simplicity to your operation, will give you so much more probability for success, and add a lot of leverage. So we get our simplicity and our probability and leverage all out of this one thing. And the one thing is simply this. Sit down with the key people in your organization, and this may include customers and vendors, as we've been describing through this whole module, not just employees. But you guys sit down, carve out the time to be quiet, and think about what is every state, every mode of outgoing communication that we have. Do we have a Facebook fan page? Do we have any Facebook groups? We have our website. We have our newsletter. We have our advertising. We might have electronic advertising. We might have print media. We have the varying email blasts that we do on a rhythmic basis, as it should be on a rhythmic basis. Any type of communication that you have that goes from your company out into the world, whether it be to customers, to vendors, to employees, what have you, capture it, document it, and have a strategic understanding as to here's the universe of communication that we have. Now, once you've captured it, and whatever you think it is right now, it's probably triple when you dig into it. You'll come up with the obvious 5 or 6 like I just threw off the top of my head. But you're going to start to recognize other little things that you do that are pieces of communication that talk to somebody who is a stakeholder in your company. So once you really have captured it all, the idea here is to say we need to create the system that when we change one thing in the business, that we have a whoop. We cover all the bases of communication to make sure that that change is integrated into every piece of communication that goes out to our universe that's out there. As compared to every time you make a change, you've got to make up. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, we should probably tell so-and-so. Oh, yeah, well, if we tell them, and then I can tell you, here's my own experience. We've made a change, we've added technology, we've changed some pricing, we've got some sort of specials that we're running for some period of time. We've got a new officer in the corporation. We've promoted somebody. I mean, there's all kinds of changes that go on in companies, in organizations on an ongoing basis. And what happens is we say, okay, well, we need to somehow communicate this. And we start with our first wave of communication. And next thing you know, we get some feedback coming back in, and somebody said, hey, I was just talking to so-and-so, and they said that now this special is no longer applicable, that now you're running that special. Oh, that's right. That was our distributor in Italy. We forgot to tell them about that. We made that change. Oh, man, okay, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Here's what the new stuff is. I'll get it right out to you right away. And that kind of stuff happens on an ongoing basis, and then you're reacting to it all the time. It might be, for example, on your website. You've got how many, so it's not just saying, oh, we have to change the website. How many pages are on that website? You've got your home page, but then it drills down into all these other pages. somebody has to say, where's the whole view of that website, and what pages need to be affected, what copy needs to be changed, and how many pages. If the website is 140 pages, you got to identify there's 16 pages that would be impacted by this change we made in the company, and then who's the responsible person that would make those changes happen to make sure that it occurs. This goes back now to the prior module when we talked about delegation and how important it is to delegate and to delegate everything. So basically now you're going to take this a step further and accelerate that process, saying what is the full universe of communication, of outgoing communications, and make sure that you've got a responsible name next to each one of these communications, so that when something changes in the company that the world needs to know about, that the Friday meeting comes, everybody gets into the room together saying, okay, with this change, let's pull out our communication chart, okay, and Charlie, you're going to take care of the website. How many pages are going to have to change in there? And Jimmy, you're going to have to handle all of the email blasts that go out. And Sally, there's the newsletter. You're going to be handling that one. And Tom, you're responsible for all our distributors that are out there throughout the world. Make sure distributors get the proper communication. And it's just, you literally have a list of everything that has to be hit in a regimented way. And boy, do you look like a powerful, got it together, everybody on the same page company that walks in lockstep under the banner of your catalyzing statement, that's got refined communication strategies that goes out to the world. And really the hard part, which is the tedious part, is identifying the universe of communications and documenting it. Once you do that, it really isn't that much harder than to run the system. So if you would take the time to do that, this is a huge game changer. This will separate you in the field. So really just two broad strokes here. Number one, collect stuff that comes in. Data collect, gather data, capture data in your company, and have a system for processing it as we described. And number two, have a consistent strategy for communicating to your world. If you do those two things, you're right up there with the Fortune 100 companies that are succeeding on the highest level who refine these processes, except you are that entrepreneur that can operate on your level but can grow because you behave in such a manner. So with that, I think that this is a very dense module as far as it's not hard to understand what we're talking about, but to actualize it into your business is going to require some work, effort, and diligence. So don't let up on it. Use the implementation guide, get your staff together. You got 30 days before the next module when you should start working on the next thing that we're going to be talking about, but get on top of this one because it's a pure game changer. So as always, we appreciate the fact that you're out there every month watching these modules, implementing, growing your business, that you're a part of this ongoing learning community. We love being with you in this community, and your success is our success, so whatever we can do to help you, we want to be able to do it.
So we want to wrap up this module. The implementation guide will be very useful to you. Be sure to have a culture of capturing, and be sure to have a culture of gratitude. If you could figure out how to weave those two things in, while, as Pat was talking about, capturing everything and putting it in one nice convenient spot so that you can react to it and review it and use it as a gold mine of information. Please do all of those things, and those will increase your simplicity, probability, and leverage. Thanks for watching another module of Finishing School.
Thank you for watching this module of Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started.